Okay, in this set of slides, we're going to see how to evaluate if statements. Again, whenever I'm evaluating a what's the result type problem, the very first thing I do is match up curly braces and draw a block. So this pair of curly braces, which is not showing up, the color, that hopefully will show up. And that's the eraser settings, that's not going to do me any good. Let's go on to the ink settings. Okay, so the very first thing I do is I match up the matching curly braces. So here's the pair. And that defines a block that'll be executed together. Next thing I do is I look for the keywords. There's 5 keywords I worry about. If, while, switch, do while, and for. In this case, I have an if statement, so that's what I'm going to use the logic for. Next thing I look for are my controlling variables, and those are the variables inside the conditional test, in this case, x. So I know this is an if problem involving x. Then I write a column heading for every variable in the problem, x and y. And as I work through the code from top to bottom, I update the value in the variables here. So I start out with this one where x is 2. Then I go to this line where y is 3. And now I've reached my conditional test. If x is less than 5, well, I look at x, it's a 2. That is less than 5, so that statement is true. So I'm going to execute everything in the block that follows the conditional test. Y plus equal 2 means to take the current value of y, which is 3, and add 2 to it, and store that value back into y. So now y becomes 5. It also tells me just to directly assign 3 into x. So I update my x. Then I come down to this print statement. This print statement does not change any values of any variables. So as far as evaluation goes, it has no effect at all on the results. My ending values are 3 and 5. Let's look at this problem. It's very similar, but not quite the same. Again, the very first thing I do is look for matching pairs of curly braces. I don't have any. That when I don't have any curly braces, especially when they're not following a keyword or a conditional test, then only the first statement is the block. So in this case, when the conditional test is true, I'm only going to execute this one statement because I don't have a block of statements. I next look for my keywords. In this case, it's if, and my controlling variable inside the conditional test, and it's x. So I come up here and I write my variable names, and I start to fill things in as I walk through it. X is given the value of 2, y is given the starting value of 3. So this conditional test becomes if x is less than 5. Well, that's true. So I'm going to execute the first statement or the first block that follows the conditional test. Well, in this case, without any curly braces, I'm just looking at my one statement, and that is saying to add 2 to the value of y and give it the new value. So now y is 5 and x is 2. Then I just continue on. In this case, it says give x a value of 3. The print doesn't make any difference, and my ending values are 3 and 5. Alrighty, another problem. First thing to do, match up those curly braces. Make it a box. So in this case, I do have a block of code that includes two statements that I'm going to execute when this conditional test is true. Second thing, look for my keyword, one of those 5 keywords: if, switch, while, do while, or for. In this case, it's an if problem. And third, what's my controlling variable? X. X and Y are all the variables used in this problem. Give them values as I go through the problem. Y is 3. Now, in this case, X is not less than 1, so this is a false statement. That means I skip over everything in this block and go right down to the following statement that follows the block. And again, the printf has no effect on the values of my variables, so I end up with x of 2 and 3 and y having a value of 3. All right, this one's a little more interesting. The first thing I do, block off those curly braces. So here's a block, and here's a block. Notice I have another keyword in here, the else. That's part of my if statement. I've circled my if, and I know that if the condition, let me find my conditional test again. It's here with a controlling variable of x. So when this conditional test is true, then I'll execute these two. Because I have an else clause, I'm only going to execute this block if this conditional test is false. Solve it the same way, put my variables up here, and start at the top and work my way down. Give x a value of 3, give y a value of 5. Look at my conditional test. Is it true or false that x is less than 3? Well, x has a value, less than 1. Well, x has a value of 3, so this statement is false. 3 is not less than 1. Because this is false, I skip the block in the if clause and I execute the block in the else clause. So I'm going to give x a new value. That value is going to be 5 modulo 4. Well, when I take 5 modulo 4, I'm going to end up with 1, because modulo means to give me the remainder when I do integer division. And 5 divided by 4 is 1 with the remainder of 1. In this case, it's the remainder that I want. I assign a value of 5 to y. Well, it's already 5, so it's really not a big change. And then I come down to my printf, which does not affect my ending value, so I end up with x of 1 and y as 5. Alrighty, line up and block out those matching curly braces. Now you see why I like to have the curly braces with a clear line of sight between the opening and closing brace on a pair. Makes it very nice and easy for me to do my blocks. Okay, keyword, if. Controlling variables are inside the conditional test. In this case, I have 2 of them, x and y. So I'm going to have to pay attention to both of them. My variables, x and y, start out. X has a value of 4. Y has a value of 2. Is it true or false that x is less than y? Well, x less than y, nope. That is false. So what am I going to do? I'm going to do my false block. In this case, I change the value of x and assign it a 3. And y gets incremented by 1 because the plus y means to take the value of y and add 1 to it. It's going to give me 3, so both of them are 3's. And that is how you solve if problems. At least what's the result type if problems. FYI, if you want some more practice with these types of problems, use your branchinator. The branchinator will generate if and switch statements all day. It never runs out. When you do a Branginator. Make sure that you display the problem, figure out what the ending values are going to be for the variables, write that down before you hit any key to show the answer. If you got it wrong, can you figure out why you got it wrong? If you got it right, well then you're understanding how to solve these problems.
Made with Doodlecast Pro.